Welcome to Behind the Case podcast, a podcast that focuses on navigating the challenges our clients face with divorce and family law in Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. Behind the Case is brought to you by the Turner Monahan legal team. With over 70 years of collective experience in divorce and family law. Together, Tyler Monahan, Keaton Monahan, Tina Campbell, and the Turner Monahan team will discuss real-life cases, answer questions, and explore family law areas from divorce to child custody. Our goal is to clarify scenarios and demystify legal jargon, making the process less daunting and reminding you that you're not alone. So sit back and let's discuss what happens behind the case. Does being the biological parent give a higher ground in a divorce case?
I wouldn't say it's a higher ground. I would say they have less steps to take. They don't have to establish themselves as a parent. They don't have to terminate another parent's rights. They don't have to adopt. So in that aspect, they have less steps to take because they are on birth certificate. But I don't think that any judge would see them as more of a parent than the other.
Right. I absolutely agree. It's just the matter of getting the additional steps done for the other parent so that they have the same legal footing. And again, it doesn't make one a better parent or a lesser parent or anything like that. It just protects their legal rights.
Yeah. And I've done this where the parent who was not on the birth certificate, she was primary until we were able to get all those steps completed because she had been primary for this child his entire life. And that's just how it was.
And the court heard evidence and testimony, took that into consideration, and they determined that that's what's in the best interest for the kiddo and was the least disruptive to kiddo's life because they basically just kept everything the same.
What happens if a man steps in to father while denying the mother's rights?
Might have to dig a little deeper into case law to really answer that one, to be honest. In our situation, we did not have that. And in our situation,
It can get very sticky. It can get really complicated at that point. And you really want to hopefully avoid those kinds of conversations because that really will just increase the cost and the time involved in the litigation to straighten all that out.
yeah, it would take a lot more evidence to follow through with a termination, I believe.
Yeah.
How does the transition of gender identity affect the spouse going through an LGBTQ plus divorce?
I don't know that it does in theory. I have never dealt with a case like that at this point in my career. But in theory, the law is supposed to be gender neutral. We're supposed to apply it gender neutrally. I think that applies to non-binary and all spectrums of gender. So in theory, it shouldn't affect it.
I have had a case where I had an individual who was transitioning throughout the course of a divorce. As far as from a legal perspective, it did not have any tremendous impact. The only impact it had was in regards to the children of the case, and only because the individual who was transitioning was not forthcoming with the kiddos that they were going through that process. And so that individual kind of fell out of their lives for about 6 or 8 months while they were going through this transition and then just reappeared as a whole different person to these kiddos. And so the kiddos were shocked because they didn't know this was going to happen. That was the only difference. I mean, which really isn't any different than in one of our traditional cases where a parent falls off the earth for a little while and then comes back with a new spouse and a baby. The shock of the change is what caused issues with the children and required additional counseling and some reunification and stuff like that. But it wasn't the fact that the individual was actually transitioning that made any actual impact on the case or how we ran the case or how the court dealt with things or how the law applied. That's all very, very much the same. It's just a matter of how it was handled with the kiddos.
Are there any other cases that stand out in a same-sex marriage you can share, and what would the outcome look like for them?
The one that stands out to me is a case where we had, a child issue. The non-biological parent had not taken any steps to move forward to become a legal parent of the kiddo before the divorce started, and the biological mom just cut her out and cut her out of the kiddo's life. And so there was about a 2-year period where the other parent was just not able to assert her rights to be able to be mom. And it was just heartbreaking. In the end, she became a joint managing conservator. And in the end, they had a shared custody agreement. But it ended up taking almost 3.5 or 4 years to get from point A to the end, and that's an extremely long time, and those kiddos went through so much unnecessary trauma because of that and the way that it was handled. So, it was a long case because of that.
A case that I'm thinking of, there's something to be said about domestic violence in the queer community. It is seen differently by the outside community than domestic violence is in an opposite sex marriage. And I think that can have an impact in a family law case. I think people may view same-sex domestic violence as not as violent as opposite sex violence, and that's just not true. Domestic violence in a same-sex marriage is still domestic violence. So sometimes I can see having to prove that violence at a little bit of a higher burden. It's not written in the law anywhere, and it's not, there's nowhere that says, okay, if you're a same-sex marriage, the violence has to be this level. But people still have to read and interpret or understand what the violence is and see if that matches the burden. And I have seen that sometimes in a same-sex marriage, they can be held to a little bit of a higher standard and need a little bit of a higher burden in domestic violence cases. And that is frustrating and heartbreaking and hard, but that's kind of what I've seen.
Mhm. And that's where it comes back to finding an attorney who understands that stance, who's dealt with that so that it's not a surprise to them, so that as they're preparing your case to go to court, they're able to go, okay, we're just going to go ahead and prove beyond what it is that we're required to prove about this particular circumstance. So that absolutely comes back to finding attorneys who have skills and who have done these kinds of things in the past.
Are there any misconceptions about same-sex divorce and what it implies? Let's take a quick pause here. If you or someone you know is navigating divorce or family law matters in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, reach out to Turner Monahan for a free legal consultation. Call us at 817-332-4477 or visit us at tumolaw.com. That's TUMOLAW.com for a free legal consultation. Now, let's get back to Behind the Case.
Sometimes there's an additional layer of fear of having to go stand in front of a judge, especially in a conservative county, and say, I am a same-sex marriage. I am asking for a divorce. Maybe I look different than the other people that have walked through these courtrooms. I am asking for, primary my child. I think there's an additional layer of fear of the authority that is the court system that my same-sex couples face or feel internally.
Yes, and we would love for them to know that that is just not necessarily the case. So don't be afraid. Come and speak to us so that we can tell you what it's really like. And worst case scenario, we can walk you into the courthouse. You can see the courtroom. You can see how this judge deals with other cases at a time that it's not your personal case. You can just kind of see the lay of the land and get your feet underneath you so that it's not as scary and so that you can recognize. I mean, our judges here in Tarrant County have been on the bench a good long time. Most of our judges have been on the bench a very long time. So attorneys who have been in this area for an extended period, we know these judges. We know them not only as judges, but as people. And so we understand kind of what they're going to do. And so we can very confidently say that, we've not seen the kind of things that they may be afraid of and the kind of judgment that they may be expecting. It just isn't there. Because again, really, at the end of the day, our judges really care predominantly about the kiddos. They think the litigants themselves, the parents, whether they're 2 men, 2 women, 2 whatever, they're adults. You deal with it. Let's take care of our kids. Yeah.
We're in a very conservative state of Texas. Do you see any potential changes in law that could affect LGBTQ plus divorces?
Yes. I mean, yeah, we're seeing it right now with the issues with children who want to transition. And that is a problem in family law cases. It's not a problem that I've personally faced in my cases. But I know that is being litigated. I know that children's name changes are being denied. So that is going to be a big area in this next election that is going to continue to change. I don't necessarily know that there's going to be any type of litigation to overturn Obergefell or any type of same-sex marriage rights. I think a lot of the focus right now is on the kids, unfortunately.
How can listeners seeking guidance on same-sex divorce find more information?
Call an attorney who has dealt with these cases before. Our office is happy to talk with you. There are LGBTQ plus resources. I always suggest starting with those nonprofits first that specialize in it. See if they have recommendations for resources. They usually do a really good job about vetting their resources and making sure they're LGBTQ plus friendly. But that's another way to go about it.
Do you have any final thoughts on LGBTQ plus divorce matters?
If you're reaching out to an attorney and you explain your circumstance and you don't feel comfortable with that person, find the next one. Yeah. There are lots of family law attorneys, and there's lots of family law attorneys in Tarrant County. And this is kind of the same for any potential client. You want to find someone that you feel like you can trust and that you have some level of a bond with, because this is an individual who's dealing with some of your most private and personal issues and also your most valuable things, your kiddos. And so do take the time to kind of talk to attorneys. Don't just hire the first person because they answered your phone and you're panicked. Just take a breath. Make sure you do a little bit of research. Ask that particular attorney that you're talking to what their history is with these types of cases. What have they done in the past? What are, their opinions? What do they think about the courts? What do they think about the judges? Those kinds of things, so you can vet that individual to make sure that it's somebody who does have the skill to be able to address any special things that come up on your case, whether it's a same-sex divorce or not. There's always unique circumstances, and you want to make sure that the people you're talking to you feel comfortable with, so you can share all that information, because we can only do so much, but we have to have the information and the truthfulness and the openness and the honesty from our clients to be able to figure out the best possible path for them to move forward. So take some time and find the right fit.
I think my kind of best piece of advice would be, if you're thinking about having children in a same-sex marriage, deal with it on the front end. I would suggest going through a doctor, getting a gestational agreement. I know it's expensive and it can be costly, but you're either going to spend it on the front end getting it done correctly or on the back end fixing it. And it's going to be a lot easier and less emotionally draining on the front end when everyone's in agreement and when we're all working together to make this miracle of life happen, versus on the back end when we're fighting and we're arguing. And it will protect you even if you don't get divorced, say somebody passes away or some other tragic that happens. Just try to protect yourself from the get-go, protect your child, and try to take those steps at the beginning of that process.
How can they reach you and hire you as an attorney?
We have a website. It is tumulaw.com. You can also give us a call. It's 817-332-4477. Miss D's our intake specialist, and she will talk to you, and you can tell her specifically if you want to hire one of us. She can hear your case and tell you which attorney she recommends. So those are the best ways to reach us.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Behind the Case. If this episode offered insight or helped clarify some aspect of divorce and family law, we encourage you to subscribe and share it with others who might benefit. For those in the DFW area that are in need of a legal consultation, you can reach us at tumolaw.com. That's TUMOLAW.com or 817-332-4477 to schedule a free legal consultation. Remember, the journey through legal matters can be complex, but you don't have to navigate it alone. Until our next discussion, take care. Please note that the information provided in this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended as legal advice. Listening to this podcast or contacting our team does not constitute an attorney-client relationship. For advice on your specific situation, please consult with a licensed attorney in your area.